Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Still in Love podcast. This is episode number 7. You excited we're back?
I am very excited that we're back.
Very good, very good. All right, so what we got for today? What are we talking about
We're
today?
talking about I just can't communicate with my spouse.
Well,
help.
Is it a cry for help?
It's a cry for help. I can't communicate with my spouse. Help. There's so many people that send us, inboxes and emails and just want a response about communication. How can I communicate with my spouse? It's difficult to communicate with my spouse because my spouse is not a communicator, or it's difficult to communicate with my spouse because I'm not a good communicator.
Correct.
But I don't know where the communication falls, but it's just difficult communicating, and I need help. And so I believe that this podcast is going to bless some families, going to bless some marriages beyond measure, because this is what people are talking. They're asking about it.
Amen.
And we believe that God has given us some answers for you. Listen, I want to share this.
Okay. What you got?
Statistics says that 41% of marriages end in divorce. 41%
That's a lot.
of the first marriage ends in divorce. 41% of the second marriage. 60% of second marriages end in divorce. So if you get married one time, then there's a 41% chance that you'll be divorced. If you get married a second time, there's a 60% chance that you'll be divorced. And if you get married a third time, then there's a 73% chance of you being divorced. So every time you divorce, the chance of you getting divorced the next time you're married increases. And four top reasons why people get divorced is infidelity, because of unfaithfulness, marital unfaithfulness. Somebody is cheating. Somebody stepped outside the marriage. Lack of intimacy.
Okay.
Lack of intimacy. There's no intimacy in the marriage. Money, because of lack of resources, or there's no camaraderie or no togetherness as it relates to money. And the fourth thing is communication, or the lack thereof. People have a difficult time communicating to people. A difficult time communicating on their jobs, difficult time communicating particularly with their spouse. And we want to talk about that on today.
All right.
First, what is communication? Communication is the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, or behavior to express or exchange information, or to express your ideas, thoughts, feelings, etc. to someone else.
Okay.
That's what communication is. The act or process of using words, sounds, signs, and behavior. So it's not just words.
Right.
It's signs, it's sounds, and behavior. That's a part of communication.
Correct.
And oftentimes people think that communication is only, when I speak to you, when I'm talking to you, I'm communicating. I remember early on in marriage, and I thought that I was a great communicator. I think that I was a decent communicator at that time, but I thought that I was great because I knew how to talk, and I knew how to speak, and I knew how to say different things and change my, whatever those things were. I knew how to really get a lot off my chest. And I found out that communicating wasn't solely about talking.
Correct.
But it's about listening.
Correct.
It's about understanding. And I think sometimes people get that confused. So just because you're the one in the marriage that's the talker doesn't mean that you're the one in the marriage that's the best communicator.
Correct.
Now, one of the first questions that I ask during premarital counseling is, which one of you all are the better communicator? And the one that's more talkative normally say
says,
that I'm the best communicator.
yeah.
Until we dive into what communication is really about.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what communication is. It's the using words, sounds, signs, and behaviors to communicate. Many marriages can be saved if the spouse improve the ways that they communicate with each other. It's often the simplest bad habit that gets couples in trouble when they don't communicate well with each other.
The small foxes, once again. It's the small foxes.
Yes. Now listen, these are these ways that you communicate. There's written communication.
So I'm writing a letter. I'm writing a note.
Texting.
Or texting.
Or emailing.
Okay.
Written communication. There's verbal communication.
What I'm speaking out of my mouth. Correct.
And then there's nonverbal communication.
How I'm responding. And that could be my body language. whether I am not paying attention, or I'm sitting with my arms crossed while you're talking to me, or I'm looking off, or I'm distracted, or allowing something else to be
Yes.
distracting to me. So
Now listen, this is gonna blow. This is gonna blow your mind. It's gonna blow your mind. Did you know that 7% of communication is content? It's what
7.
you say. 7.
Wow.
Only 7% of communication is what you say. So in other words, you're talking loud, but you what?
Saying nothing.
7% of communication is content, is what you say.
Yeah.
38% of communication is how you say it. You heard the saying that, it's not what you say, but it's how you say it.
Right.
Because you can be saying that, I love you, or you can say, I love you. So it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You can say, hey, I really would like for you to come home on time tonight. Or you can say, you need to be in the house at a decent hour tonight. So it's not what you said to me, but it's how you said it to me. 38% of communication is tone, how you say it.
Yes.
And 55% of communication is body language.
Well.
Body language. If I'm talking to you, what are you doing when I'm talking to you? When I'm speaking to you? When I'm really trying to express how what you did made me feel? Are you giving me eye contact? Are you sighing? Are you in your phone? Are you texting? Are you looking off? Are you watching television? Are you changing the channel? Are you trying to see what the baby's doing? Are you getting distracted by any little thing? So 55% of communication is your body language. So you're showing me that you're not interested in what I'm saying to you, or what I'm communicating with you, because of your body language.
Yes.
So you have to really be careful in body language, in communication. Be careful, when my spouse is talking to me. How am I looking? How am I responding? Am I shaking my head like, okay, like what you're doing now?
I'm into the conversation.
You're into the conversation.
Right.
I'm talking to you. It can even be a tough conversation. And I can say things that really make you feel uncomfortable. But I think it's important that you continue to nod your head, and because you're communicating with
Or
me.
just simply giving eye contact. Because
Yes.
sometimes we can be in a conversation and I don't agree. So I'm not going to nod, but I will give you eye contact to let you know that, okay, I hear you.
But
or,
I think nodding lets people, I hear you. Now,
correct.
maybe
That's
I
correct.
don't
That's
agree
correct.
with you, and I have my
That's
opportunity
correct.
to speak, but
Yeah.
just, okay,
Yeah.
That's interesting, because sometimes that can be a little intimidating too,
Yeah.
to where you just looking. That's still, that's body language,
Yeah.
And so I think
sometimes that's the intent.
yes, I know.
That's the intent. I'm just looking.
Yeah.
I'm not responding. I'm just looking. So you're correct. You're correct with that. Yeah.
So that's so key. John Maxwell once said that the number one reason that people get hired is because of attitude,
Okay.
and the number one reason that people get fired is because of attitude.
Well, hey.
So it's what is your attitude? What is your body language? How are you responding to what's taking place? And so sometimes people don't even want to talk to you because of your body language. You keep people away from you because of your body language,
Yes.
because of your,
Yes.
you're communicating, you're conveying a message in your body language, and people miss that.
Yes.
And they think
I
that
don't want to be bothered.
that's right. Or it's how you communicate, your body language and your communication. You can say something really aggressive, and your body language and what you're saying, or what you're saying is not aggressive, but the body language is showing aggression, and that can cause a person to feel some kind of way about how they're being communicated to, because of the body language.
So true. So very true.
I remember we first got married,
Uh-oh.
and I came from a situation where there was a lot of communication, and and sometimes we communicated the right way, and sometimes we didn't communicate the right way.
That would be correct.
Sometimes it was fighting in the house.
In your home.
In my home. But one of the things that we did do, we addressed situations. We addressed when something was like, when somebody drunk all the Kool-Aid, we look, who drunk up all the Kool-Aid? Man, that was my Kool-Aid. I put my Kool-Aid in here. So we talked about it.
Yeah.
So there was really never any unresolved issues in the home. There was never really any things that we didn't deal with, that we didn't talk about. And so what happened under learning that, and just even being younger, I think that God has gifted me with an ability to communicate. But I remember us getting married, and I brought my communication style to the marriage, and you brought your communication style to the
Correct.
marriage, which was
A very passive aggressive silent treatment giving communication style.
No, not you.
Yes, me. We've shared this so many times. Just about in my home, if we were upset, for one, it's all women. So there were no men in my home, consistently. And if we got upset with each other, then we would be upset. We would not speak to each other, walk right past each other in the house, walking down the hall, and we're not going to say anything to each other. But you would wait until maybe 2 or 3 days pass, and then you just pick right back up like nothing happened. Normally something would happen, or a life situation would happen that would require that you talk to each other. And once that door is back open, now you pick right back up where you started. So you act like nothing was, like nothing happened. Now, and really all it was, it just kind of kept building up. But that's how we communicated.
And how did that affect us in marriage, or my style versus your style? Explain that to me. How did it affect us?
Well, you came into it, if there was a disagreement or just anything, you came into it wanting to talk immediately. Like the situation would happen at 4. You want to talk at 4:03 about it, and let's deal with it and let's work through it. Whereas I'm like, yeah, I'm not used to this. Like, I'm used to, we mad at each other. I'm going to go into the room. You stay in here. We're going to walk past each other like we don't see each other. And then in a few days, we'll pick back up, and we're not going to talk about the situation though. We're just going to pick up like nothing happened. And so that's kind of how it was, especially early on in marriage. We just, like just out there, almost like you bumping your head into a brick wall. Just, this isn't working for me. But it was very uncomfortable for me to, something could happen. And here you are like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's deal with it. And immediately I go into, shutdown mode. Like, I'm shutting down, I'm retreating, and I'm pulling back. Not even processing it. I'm not, because even in the communication, it's you're having to process what happened. How do you feel about something? So on and so forth. That didn't happen. I would be upset, and I'm just not going to talk about it. I would know that I'm mad, but I'm not going to communicate that I'm upset. I'm not going to communicate that I'm mad. I'm just going to pick right back up and push it out the way. And so, of course, that's learned behavior. So it took us to realize, like, okay, we keep bumping into this wall, this communication wall, and we're falling and failing every single time. So we can't keep doing it this way. And I think both of us at that moment had to realize, like, I don't remember when I shared that with you, but that, like, give me a minute. Like, okay, I recognize that the way that I communicate is not good. I recognize that, but I need a minute to unlearn, and I need a minute to process, like, how is this? So what, how is this supposed to work? It's the uncomfort that comes with learning something new. And when you've been doing something a certain way for so long, that it's just, you sometimes will just become blind to another way to do it. And so here we are, a situation arises, and we need to talk and we need to communicate, and I have to be aware, like, okay, now is not the time for you. You don't go into the other bedroom, but that he wants to talk about it, because communicating is the right way to deal with this. And so realizing that, for one, like, okay, communication is good. Yep. And just because you talk about something, it brought up so many other issues, because you want to talk about it. Okay, you talking about it, that's going to probably show that I'm not perfect.
Oh my goodness.
It's going to show a flaw or a fault of mine. You wanting to talk about something means that something is wrong, and I don't know what to do with that. You wanting to talk about the situation at hand, it just, everything about that was uncomfortable for me. Like, I just don't want to address things. I just don't, I can go into this whole thing about, you valuing yourself. I could go into all of that. We don't have enough showtime for that today, but it was certainly not wanting to communicate. And then I felt like, if we're going to talk about it, it just, I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to fight, because sometimes you go from one extreme to the other. In your mind, you think, well, I handle this the best way by not talking about it. And so I look at communication as almost fighting, or we're arguing, and I don't want to do that. So I avoid it altogether. When had I learnt the right way,
As you what?
lunt. That's something my granny would say. If I had learnt it the right way, I would have learned that communication is good. That you don't have to see dialoguing and talking about things as a negative. It is good to be able to communicate how you feel, what you're feeling about something, so that you can get to, again, this expected or this desired end. Yes. But again, we don't sometimes think about that desire end. I'm sure we'll get into that later, but early on we had to definitely deal with this communication issue.
Yes.
That we had, that was very present.
You know, I remember me being on 10, you know, and you know,
No.
yes. and I remember, you know, I felt that, you know, I felt like I was the best communicator on the planet, and you were the worst communicator on the planet.
Correct.
Like, it was frustrating to me, and I was like, you don't want to talk about anything, but you were looking at me like, dude, you want to talk about everything. Like everything right now, right here. You don't want to let me, like, it happens, and there you go.
It was almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
It was
and
very
you
overwhelming.
shared that with me.
Yeah.
And I was like, how is it overwhelming? You know, but we were so at totally two different ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
And so what I had to learn, and you helped me with this, to where, you know, you slowed it a bit because you communicated with me.
Correct.
Like, you know, pretty much you're a 10, and let's just use these numbers. You're a 10, I'm a 0. You know, not 10 not meaning good, 0 not meaning bad.
Right.
It's just, I don't want to talk about anything. You want to talk about everything right now.
Correct.
So where's that happy medium?
Yeah.
And we had to compromise, and I had to slow down and say, you know what? I want to address everything as soon as it take place. We got to talk about it right now. I don't care who's around. We're going to go in the other room. We're going to go in the car. Whatever we got to do to talk about it. But you committed to, okay, because in the perfect world, you would never talk about it.
Correct.
In a perfect world for me, I'll talk about it right here, right now.
Correct.
So now that we are compromising, let me take a minute and not talk about it immediately, but give you a couple of hours or give you the next day or whatever before we address it. Your compromise was, hey, I'm not going to never talk about it, but just give me a minute to process it, to think about it, and talk about it in a couple of hours.
Correct.
But it challenged you to the point of, you know, because you had to do something that you were uncomfortable doing. And that's communicating and talking about it. And it challenged me because I had to do something that I was uncomfortable doing, and that's not talking about it when I wanted to talk about it. But I think it really has helped our marriage, you know, for us to say, hey, look, let me come down from a 10 and drop down to a 5 and say, okay, let me chill a little bit. And you say, let me come from the 0 and move up to the 5.
Yeah.
And the 5 for you is a compromise, and the 5 for me is a compromise. Yeah. And I feel like we do a great job now communicating in marriage. Still have challenges, but I feel like it is totally different now versus what it was before.
And it has taken years of practice. So, you know, for those couples who are watching and listening, you know, it's not going to be automatic. You're not going to recognize the problem like, oh, well, we just need to communicate more. Well, you have to practice and find your rhythm. I think as couples, like you kind of have to find your rhythm of communicating. Like it's whatever that is, but it takes practice to find it. You have to, it's kind of like if you want to get good at something, it is continually doing that thing until I become well at it. Yes. So I don't want to give some sense of false hope to couples, you know, like it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take, we've been in this thing 19 years. And early on, it took us quite a few times of getting it wrong in order to, you know, you get tired of hitting your leg on the same spot.
Yes.
Move the coffee table. You know, like if you keep bumping your head and bumping your, like, okay, something has to change. You know, you can keep saying, well, I just got to remember to walk around. How about you just do something else and you move the coffee table that you don't do it. So,
yes.
yeah.
So in communication, a couple of things about communication. It's so important. In anything that you do, if you're coaching, communication is important. If you're leading a company, communication is important. If you're working on a job, communication is important. If you have children, everything that you do, communication is paramount. It is so important to communicate and to be a good communicator. People really become frustrated with people who really don't communicate well. So I think it's so important. As we was talking about body language, eye contact, the head nods, just looking that looking like you're interested in the conversation.
Yeah.
Those things would take you so far in marriage when you're looking at each other, when you're making eye contact, when you're putting your phone down, when you're not listening to respond, but you're listening to understand.
Yep.
So I'm not listening to you so that I can respond, because sometimes when you communicate and you listen to respond, it's like, okay, let's just, just you can't wait till your spouse get through talking so you can say what's on your heart and on your mind.
Yes.
You have to listen to understand rather than listening to respond.
Yes.
That's the problem with some of us out there
Yes.
today. You only listen to respond. You only listen to plead your case. You only listen so that you can share what's on your heart. You don't seek to understand. You seek to be understood. And what's important is you have to seek to understand, then seek to be understood. Y'all didn't hear that. You have to seek first to understand, then be understood. But what happens in marriage oftentimes is you seek first to be understood, then you'll understand. And that's not healthy in any marriage.
Yep.
It's not healthy in any marriage. Communication is so important. I remember being in high school, my 11th grade year.
Okay.
I was in high school, and it was a teacher that was there, Miss Johnson.
Okay.
And she was teaching. I forgot what type of math we were taking in. And she was teaching, and it was this one young lady in the classroom that really didn't get it. She didn't understand it.
Okay.
And Miss Johnson was trying to go over it. Well, no, you have to do it like this, and you have to and the girl, she couldn't get it, and she was like, Miss Johnson was just trying to break it down for her, and the girl was so frustrated, and she said blanket, but she dropped the F bomb.
Okay.
Forget it. But she didn't say forget it. And Miss Johnson did not understand what she said, or she heard the F
The F
bomb,
word, right.
but she didn't hear her say it. She thought that she said you. So Miss Johnson said, forget me. And she didn't say forget.
Right.
She said, forget me. Forget me. Oh, no. And just went off, sent the girl out of the classroom. I think she buzzed the officer, wrote her up, and the girl ended up getting a board suspension. The girl was trying to communicate that she didn't say it, but Miss Johnson over talked her,
Yeah.
and the girl got frustrated even more and just walked out of class. I'm sitting there as a junior in high school looking at this thing unfold, and I'm like, oh my goodness. This young lady, because of her failure to communicate, she's now kicked out of school. Had she calmed down, let Miss Johnson calm down, and let Miss Johnson get done what she was saying, and said, Miss Johnson, listen, I used profanity. I used it bad, and I should not have done that.
Yeah.
But out of respect for you
Yeah.
and care for you, I would never
didn't
say,
it. Yeah.
forget you.
Yeah.
I said, forget it.
Yeah.
I was not frustrated at you. I was frustrated at myself.
Right.
So I was wrong. And so she still would have probably been in trouble,
Yeah.
but the board suspension maybe would have been a home suspension.
Yeah.
But her failure to communicate, her lack of communication caused her to get kicked out of school. And oftentimes, your lack of communication could harm your marriage. Your lack of communication would have your spouse thinking that you don't care for them because you fail to communicate or learn the art of communicating, or invest in your life like this podcast, getting involved in this pod and learn how, this really is good. I can really try to adopt this style of communication so I can be a better communicator in my marriage. And so I see kids all the time at school, and I was working at schools, getting in trouble, getting suspended because they didn't know how to communicate, because a teacher would think or assume that they meant something that they didn't mean.
Right.
And because the kid could not communicate and articulate what he meant, he would get in trouble. And some people, because they can't communicate, they end up going to jail because of their failure to communicate, their frustration, and the police or, people really not understanding where they're coming from because they can't articulate it. They end up getting in a lot of trouble. So a failure to communicate could cause dire consequences.
It could. That was very good. Very good example too.
Yes.
Very good example.
So, needless to say that we're going to have to do a part 2 because this is good. Because one of the things I want to talk about next week is this: how do I communicate with my defensive spouse?
Okay.
Some of y'all got some spouse that's defensive, and every time you say something to them, every time you speak to them, every time you address a situation, your spouse gets so defensive and frustrated and don't really know, you're just blown away. Like, what do I do? How do I talk to him? Because when I bring an issue to him or I bring a situation to him, he always get mad and he shut down and he get defensive and I feel some kind of way. So I just suppress what I feel. I just don't even say anything anymore. But when I suppress what I feel and don't say anything, he continues to make me frustrated, and I feel like we need a counselor. We need to go to divorce court because he's very defensive, and I don't know what to do. And we're gonna dive into that to really talk about different steps and different things that you can do in order to communicate with your defensive spouse. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Listen, communication. How do you express negative feelings constructively? I feel some kind of way about you. How do I express that constructively? There'll be times in marriage when you feel bitterness, resentment, disappointment, or disapproval.
Yeah.
These feelings need to be communicated in order for change to occur.
Yes.
But how you express these thoughts, they're critical. For instance, I'm really disappointed that you're working late again tonight.
Okay. And not.
You don't love me because if you love me, you'll come home on time. You said you weren't working late no more.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's how do I express negative feelings constructively rather than destructively? Like, how can I communicate with you? Because, see, that's the problem. Because of my failure to communicate, because of my lack of communication skills, when I get frustrated, I blow up.
Yes.
When I get frustrated, I can't talk through it and walk through it and slow down enough to say, hey, look, and have self-awareness to where, you know what? I've been doing this lately. Like, I've been thinking about, how did this make me feel?
Very good.
How am I feeling right now? I just had an interaction with this person, and rather than respond, I think about how am I feeling right now? I don't like how I'm feeling right now.
Yes.
I don't like the exchange that we just had.
Yes.
I feel disrespected.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
So you have
I
to
love
pivot and just really get in touch with your feelings and ask yourself, how did that interaction just make me feel? But some people have no self-awareness, and they don't, and they're not aware of, themselves, and but you have to be aware of yourself. How does this make me feel? What am I feeling right now? Think through it, slow it down, and how do I communicate my frustrations without blowing up? Because a lot of people, when they frustrated, they feel the need to blow up. Or I communicated because I suppressed it so much, and I don't talk about it, I don't deal with it, and now you did it again. So now I'm finished. And another thing, you got me messed up because when I told you to do it the first time, you ain't do it, and now you did it again. And
yes.
because I feel resentful.
Yeah.
I feel disappointed.
Yeah.
I feel frustrated.
Yeah.
And I'm finna let it off my chest.
Yeah.
Because time and time again, I didn't say anything. Because that's a bad way of communicating. Because you have we'll talk about this. You have a lose-win approach where you lose and they win. And when you continue to lose and allow other people to win, you suppress your anger, suppress your frustration, suppress your feelings. And so now when it's time to come out, you explode like a Coke bottle. I'm sick and tired every time I lie. And your spouse is looking like,
what just happened?
Why didn't you say nothing the last time?
Yep.
I didn't say, I said something 3 months ago and you still. And it's like, okay, talk. I mean, just let me know. Hey, look, baby, like let it build up a little bit. Like, it's like the fourth time I asked you to empty the garbage and you hadn't done it. And it really makes me feel some kind of way I feel like you don't love me when you don't do the things I asked you to do.
You're not hearing me.
So the next time, baby, now I know we talk, baby. Please empty the garbage. I get anxiety to see the same garbage here, day after day after day. I ain't grew up like this, and please. Then the next time, baby, can we sit and talk? Because this is the seventh day in
Apparently,
a row.
you're not hearing me about the garbage.
Do I need to take the garbage out? Do we need to hire somebody?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Correct.
But what do we need to do about this garbage?
Correct.
Now is okay. Now, baby, now come on now, baby. What are we gonna do?
Okay.
Opposed to going from 0 to 100 because you failed to really articulate and communicate how you feeling. And it's how do I express this constructively?
I want to back up just a bit. Just a bit. I think one of the greatest gifts, there's a lot of things we can do for ourselves, but one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is really taking the time to, I think, it's so much I want to say, but you sitting and pondering and saying, so how do I feel? I love that because I feel like, although I am not a big talker about, especially my feelings and all of that, doesn't mean that I won't communicate them. It's just I'm not as open. Just, this is how I feel. I'm just not a big talker. And so, but I feel like, I don't remember when it happened or when that light bulb went off in my life, but I feel like it is such a good thing in a person's life. And I practice this, that how do I feel? I process how I feel. I need moments when, after almost every interaction, sometimes with people, and especially large groups, I have to think about, okay, how do I feel? I take a few seconds or a few moments and how did I feel about that? And that often determines whether or not I will go back into a similar environment or whether I will interact with an individual. Because if I have negative feelings or experiences with the person, I'm just like, I don't, you create this in my life. Therefore, I don't want to, I limit those interactions. And the opposite, you bring me joy when I'm around you. Like, you make me laugh or I enjoy being around you. So I want to create those experiences. Or, I don't really know how to feel when I'm around you. So it's probably best that I don't, because it's just kind of like a gray area. And I'm not a fan of gray with people. Yeah. So I think that's probably one of the best things that we can do is identifying that. But I think I wish in every single school, I know we can, there would be a great desire in every home, but I understand how that may be a problem because we often teach our children subconsciously and inadvertently how to communicate, because how we communicate with them and how they see us communicate with other people. So we are teaching our children. So that may be harder. We can talk about this over the pulpit so that the families that come to church can hear this message of communicating. But what I desire and what I would love to see is that there is communication. I don't know if that is a series, if that is a class, or if there is some type of continuous, or for children. But just so that children can learn
that's right.
how effective they can be, or they can just plain old get in touch with how they feel about something, and they can be taught how to express that.
Girl, that's good.
Because a lot of by the time most people become adults, our behavior is so ingrained in us that it is sometimes hard to change. But when we can take little children at 2 and 3, or even prior to then, but I'm sure there's some communication experts out here that's like, no, you can start well before then. But if you could get them and make that a part of like some curriculum where children learn, like, this is what I feel. So now we're talking about emotions. We're talking about knowing what emotions are, knowing that I, for so long as a child, only thought, I knew that I experienced certain emotions, but disappointment would always turn into rage or always turn into anger. If I was disappointed, I would always end up at a place of anger. And I think it's just sometimes it wasn't because I just didn't know how to process disappointment. And when I feel these negative feelings, what do I do with them?
Come on, girl.
And it's so hard because we interact with adults all the time who have not learned that, who have not learned what is this thing that I feel on the inside of me? And it feels really bad, but what do I do with it after I feel it? And so if it's anger, or if I'm upset, or if I'm resenting something and I don't know how to communicate, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling mad, or I'm angry, or I am disappointed. How that they kind of like on that in social work, there's this like emotion wheel. So it's this cycle of emotions that we can kind of go from 0 to 100. But again, if we have not learned how to process those emotions, or for one, it starts with identifying, being able to identify what those emotions are, and then what do I do with it? Now that I feel it, what do I do with it? And if you are a child that was, like I was relatively quiet. Sometimes I was relatively quiet. And so I'm internalizing all of those negative feelings, all of those negative emotions. And when I'm not processing it with someone and I'm not expressing it, I'm just a ball of insecurity. I'm just a ball of unexpressed emotion.
Jesus.
And so I didn't. Now here, I became an adult, but even during that time, during my formative years, I am still forming. I am morphing into something, and now I am morphing into an adult that refused to communicate about certain things because that was very difficult to do. Because early on, I was in an environment that created a certain type of communication, and then I wasn't in another environment that challenged that. So I think there is home life, but then sometimes when children are in an environment that challenges what you may be experiencing at home, sometimes that's good because it gives us another way to experience life.
Yes.
It exposes us to something outside of just what we know. I'm grateful for it all, but just it's still having that some type of intervention would have been helpful. But it wasn't until I became an adult, and honestly until I got married, that because living with someone and being in an environment and becoming one with someone is what really brings out a lot of the stuff that is dormant in us.
Amen. Listen, I think that is so good. That is so. I think that is so important that we do that. That we, I don't know, kids need to be trained on that.
Yes.
Coach my son, our son Little League team, and one of the younger kids on the smaller team was just having a meltdown in the game. He was just crying. He just didn't know what. He was just so frustrated. He wouldn't get in. We went to the huddle and he was just and so he's a good player, but he was so discombobulated at that time that I was like, we got to get him out of the game. So he got out of the game and he was just crying on the sideline. And I was hugging him. Man, what's wrong? What's wrong? I don't know.
I feel like this sometimes.
Like, he didn't know what. I'm like, man, son, what's going on? I don't know. Well, how you feeling? I don't know. Like, he didn't know why he was crying. He didn't know. But it was difficult for him. And I've heard ladies say that before.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I don't know, honey.
I don't know what's going on. I'm just crying. I'm looking. I can't fit my clothes. I'm bleeding. Whatever it is.
Emotional mess.
And so, but getting in touch with it, he did not know what was going on, why he was crying, and he was just crying. So, if that is not addressed and not dealt with, he's 8 now.
Yeah.
He's going to be 28, Lord willing.
That's it.
38 and 48.
That's it.
He'll still
be struggling. What's going on?
I don't know how to articulate. I don't know how to say. I don't know how to express it. And so the art of communicating is paramount in any situation, and particularly in marriage. Listen, that's our time. That's our time. That's our time. This is really, really good. But we're gonna have to see you on next week. And listen, make sure you tune in next week to the Still in Love podcast. It is going to bless your life.
Yes.
How do I communicate and deal with my defensive spouse? It's going to bless you. God bless. Don't just start in love,
but stay in love.
Thanks for tuning in to Still in Love podcast. God bless.